Hello from the brutal capitalist dictatorship of Kuala Lumpur. I hope you're having an amazing day, because if you're having an amazing day, we are having an amazing day.
And they have to do is, oh, don't go to Malaysia, it's bad, it's this, it's that. Why do you have to do that? If you don't like it, just leave, and that's it. Just renounce that you're Malaysian, don't talk about it, just say you're Australian, you're American, you're whatever, and that's it. Secondly, I don't know, I think every case, individual case is different, but my understanding is perhaps when they grew up in Malaysia, they felt not accepted. Maybe because they didn't speak their native language, maybe they couldn't speak Malay and they were bullied, or they just weren't accepted. And they grew up with this kind of resentment, so they become extra westernized as a way of
Getting back.
revenge, getting back at the country. Because we have the same thing in America. We have minority groups where they don't fit in, so they become extra conservative or extra right wing or extra something to get back at the community. And so I can understand this psychology, but the best revenge, if you want revenge, the best revenge is just live your life without trying to attack a country, because maybe you don't like it, but there's millions of foreigners who love it here.
I love it here as well.
And locals, locals will love it
There
here.
are millions of people who are happy
Because
to be
think about it, right? If I come to you as a Westerner, as someone who grew up and was born Western mentality, Western culturally, and I say, I hate America because blah, 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 you would be the first to tell me I'm, what's the word?
You're
Spoiled, ungrateful, thousands of people, they're trying to come to America, they're dying to come to America, and you want to leave. I could say the same thing about you. Millions of foreigners also want to come to Malaysia. Locals love Malaysia, they love their country. So it can kind of go both ways. Like this.
Yeah, it's like you sometimes don't know what you've got until you've lost it.
Until you lost it, yeah.
Perhaps these people don't want to admit it, but perhaps they're having buyer's remorse, and that's why they're coping by saying, there's no future for Malaysia, there's no future for Malaysia, but in their hearts they're probably saying, God, I wish I hadn't left. I wish I hadn't cut ties with this country.
So I'm thinking maybe somebody is paying them $30
Could
to
be.
say all these things.
Mr. Chin, Professor Chin is a professor at Tasmania University. Now, he is a professor of Asian studies, supposed to be their local Malaysia expert, right? But he has nothing good to say about Malaysia. So how can he be a Malaysia expert? It's like saying Sapenza is an expert of China, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that he's working for a Western institution is already very sus, right?
Yeah, you see, the thing is, before, when I was brainwashed, I used to think that unless you study at a top Western university like Harvard and all those Ivy League tower schools, that, you know, this is the only time you would have authority to have an opinion about something. But now as I travel, there's so many different viewpoints and different versions and tales of what should and shouldn't be, the right history, for example.
Yeah.
So if you're educated from a Western academic, how could you say that you're knowledgeable about Malaysia? Wouldn't it make more sense to be more knowledgeable about Malaysia if I studied Malay language and read books written by actual Malay historians?
Well, I would
not
say
a Western. Imagine, imagine Chinese from China studied American history, and they said we are. They never studied in America, but we are professionals of American studies, and they are going to tell all of us about American history. We'd be like, no, that's nonsense.
No.
You're foreigners.
It's like, that's why the Joy Luck Club, novels like the Joy Luck Club always seem to have an Orientalist streak, because they're always seen through the colonial lens, because it comes from a person who moved from China to America, right? how can they be the China expert when they were trying to get away from China to America? Just like James Chin is living, if he was a professor at a Malaysian university, that would be more credible.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the fact is, he's in Tasmania and he's a professor at Tasmania, right? So he's part of a Western university.
Plus, Western academics are
Chauvinistic.
very chauvinistic. They're pro-Western. So anything you learn is going to be from the viewpoint of the Western,
The white man. Or colonial.
pro-colonial policies, right? So it's kind of like, I don't trust anything that comes from them in regards to the East. If I want to know about Western culture, then it's great. But to learn about Eastern culture, it would make more sense to just go to study with Eastern professors, Eastern universities, and study in that language, and go to the countries and villages and towns, and you actually see the museums, you see the actual people who know about, who lived through these times, who lived through the wars, not what some guy, some pencil pusher.
That's why if I'm an Australian university student and I go to James Chin as my authority on Malaysia, I'm getting a second-hand experience of Malaysia. Even though James Chin was born and raised in Malaysia, he is part of a Western academic institution. So he is a Western academic, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So,
And one last point, I lived in Kazakhstan 4 years, similar to Russia. But when people ask me, where do I live? I just say Russia because they don't know the geographics. Many people don't know Central Asia. They don't know Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all that stuff. So I just say Russia. So when I tell them I'm permanently moving to Russia, it's kind of like I've been to Russia already. I've interacted with the people. I speak the language, and they are going to tell me about Russia versus their secondhand experience versus my firsthand experience, and they're going to tell me that I'm wrong because the news said XYZ or a friend said XYZ versus me who actually lived there, speak the language, understand the culture, know I have friends there, tell me I'm wrong and I don't know what I'm talking about because it's not academically allowed or reviewed by Western academics.
yes,
That's nonsense.
they are not the gold standard.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about Israel and Palestine. Now this has been on the news a lot, and there are people who are trying to divert attention away from it, like Siti Kasim. And I was told by BDS Malaysia, Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Malaysia, that many non-Muslim Malaysians, which is code word for Indians and Chinese, actually consider Palestine to be a Muslim Malay issue, and they either feel indifferent to it, which is not that bad if they're just neutral, either take the neutral stance, or even worse, are more sympathetic to Israel because they feel that Israel represents them, the non-Malay. I've seen comments on Malaysia Kini like, oh, you know, why is it that the Jews are always being blamed for Muslim problems, even though Palestinians are not all Muslim? It seems to me that unfortunately, because of the race tribalism in this country, many non-Malays are regarding this cause as a Malay-Muslim cause, and therefore, what do you have to say about this as an American communist or American socialist?
So you have been successfully divided by your own people. And when I say people, I mean as a nation. Because markers just... how to say this correctly? Markers or identities such as religion or race is BS. It's a false ideology because you don't need to be So first, you don't need to be Muslim to support Palestine. That's being Muslim or not Muslim. That's a non-issue. You don't
Do I
need to
look
be,
like a Muslim?
You don't need to be Arab or Palestinian to support Palestinians. Race is not is a non-issue. This is a complete class struggle, and I'm going to prove to you why. So if it's a Muslim thing, if you think that it's just Muslims standing together, what about the rich Muslims?
Siti Kasim comes to mind.
Yeah, the rich
As
Muslims the rich Muslims support Israel.
A
They
lot of
tend
them
to
do.
tend to
Yeah.
support
Israel.
Israel. Meanwhile, poor Christians,
Poor Christians.
poor Jews, poor atheists, poor Buddhists, etc., etc.
Working class people.
Working class people of different races, different nationalities, yes, different countries are supporting Palestinians.
Yeah, it's a class.
So this is totally a class struggle. It's all about the working class. Because for me, when I see the Palestinians, it's an eerie reminder of American history. It's like it's repeating itself. It's like the manifest destiny when
the white settlers.
the settlers felt that they had the right to take the Native American land. They dehumanized them, the Native Americans, calling them savage, barbaric, uncivil. So they murdered them, they kicked them out, and there's practically none of them left today. They have very little land, and if they leave those lands, the government's going to take it. And what do we see in Palestine and Israel? The same thing. They're coming in, these complete foreigners, never been to. They're probably from New York, just like me, or they're from somewhere in Europe, coming to Palestine saying, "This is my land," and they're just indiscriminately murdering anything that remotely resembles Palestinian cause. So this, to me, it makes me very angry because it's kind of like when I see the Palestinians, it's like I see myself in their shoes because we have a similar history in this regard. It's like seeing it play over again. So it has nothing to do with this religion and the thing about Malay Muslims and non-Malay. It's nonsense.
It's nonsense.
It's just putting you two against each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to end up on the wrong side of history and going to die on a very bad hill if they keep going on like this and say, we are going to side with Israel because it'll make the Malays angry, right? They're going to not only alienate the Malays, the reasonable Malays, it'll also basically alienate the entire world against them, because basically the majority of the world is in unison with the people of Gaza and the occupied Palestine, right? So the fact that these people are siding with the imperialist ruling class just to spite the Malays is like, or the conservative Malay Muslims, it's like shooting yourself in the foot to spite the ground,
Another thing I have to pull up that I have to expose, I notice a lot of, I don't want to call them Saxonism, but westernized people always seem, especially the ones that tend to have wealth, always speak on behalf of all people of their own race. So I noticed some of these westernized Chinese.
Yeah, Malaysian Chinese. I can show you.
Oh,
no, that's yours.
That's mine too.
That's yours too. You have two phones. Okay, sorry.
Okay. For example, like we Chinese
support Israel. We believe they're in the right.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Yeah.
But it's complete nonsense to say we Chinese because there's Chinese everywhere in the world, all in different classes, different religions, different ways of life. It's like when I see some Chinese diaspora say, "Oh, you don't know Mandarin," but in China, people speak other dialects, not just Mandarin. But you're speaking on behalf of one particular Chinese for one particular group, but you're speaking for everyone. I think that's kind of evil what you're doing because you're making it bad for everyone else because maybe you have a problem with the issue. Maybe you side with Israel or whatever, but
don't drag me into it.
Because what's going to happen is maybe someday, maybe a full moon will happen and something happens and the Malay says, "You know what? You feel that we're treating you bad? Okay, now we're going to treat you bad." And then you're going to have real hardcore discrimination, real racism. And it's going to affect all non-Malays because of a few group of Malaysian Chinese or Malaysian Indians or. Okay, sorry for the cut. So I was saying, if you broadly speak for everyone, and then something happens, now everyone who you broadly brushed is also going to suffer because of your actions. So you're collectively punishing your own group for your individual opinion, and I think that's not right. If you have a problem, if you disagree with the Muslim Malays, okay, but you should speak for yourself.
Yes, speak for yourself. Don't
Not
speak for
everyone.
me.
Just like Afro-Saxons in America want to try to speak for me by saying, oh, we're all, I don't know, they'll say like, we're from Africa, we're from this tribe, we think like this, we think like that. But I don't think like that. I don't believe what they believe. But they want to speak for all of us. So I think that's a toxic thing to do.
Okay. Absolutely, you know, I'm very annoyed when I see people posting stuff like, oh yeah, non-Malays feel differently about this, because who are they to speak on behalf of non-Malays? I'm a Malaysian Chinese and I'm a socialist, so naturally I'm sympathetic to the besieged and occupied Palestinians because I'm anti-imperialist and therefore, as every socialist ought to be, right? Let's get to the topic of